In this video, I will explain why there are only two genders in a purely scientific and logical way. I will examine the linguistic proof, which to my knowledge only I have put forward, and I will connect it directly to biology. Before I begin, please note that when researching etymology for yourself, P.I.E. or Proto-Indo-European is not a real language, it is only a theory-crafted language. Now, the word gender comes from the Latin word genus, which has several meanings, all in the same family denoting birth, descent, kind, from the word kin that you've likely heard used before, species, race, group, etc. This word genus is still in use in the public study of biology today and can sometimes find its way into colloquial speech. Therefore, it has various meanings stemming from the root, but the origin remains. Now, genus itself has ordered branches in Latin. Genitor and genitrix, which mean father and mother respectively, with the word genitus meaning the begotten, as in a son of a father. Also, there is the word generare, to beget, to produce offspring, which is where we get the word generate, which in more recent centuries has been used analogously to refer to how we, quote, generate electricity. You'll find that many words we use nowadays with reference to technology were only used analogously and not literally, with another notable example being artificial intelligence. So, as any honest person can plainly see, the word gender is expressly used to signify by what means a person is ordered to generate life, in a male way or in a female way, for which I have another analogous usage of a term, that is, male and female in plugs, outlets, and cables, and this has found its way into the current lexicon. Now, a common refrain used is that sex is different than gender, but if we analyze the words, we can see a similar origin. Sex is a word which stems from the Latin sexus, which literally means gender, but also it means a division. And therefore, I think it has rightly been connected to the Latin word sectus, a perfect passive participle of seco, which means to cut off, to divide, etc., from which word we get section, and who some even link to the word sect. But the former is enough to prove my point, for by meaning section, or division, or cut, etc., you can already see what the term meant. That is, to which division or section of the population does one belong to, the male section or the female section. But also remember, we don't even have to go that far, because sexus already literally means gender. Now, going back to the two individual classifications, the two genders, male and female, they both come from Old French words which in turn come from Latin again. Female comes from the Latin word femella, which refers to a young girl, and originates from the word femina, which refers to a woman, and some say that the word femina literally means she who suckles. And the word male comes from the Latin masculus, which comes from the word mas, meaning man. But quite relevantly, the word male in English replaced the Old English word wappened, which for modesty's sake, I don't think I have to go any further to explain, and this proves the biological nature of the male gender, so I hope I've made things quite clear. But some may try to hide behind the etymological fallacy, to say that all of this is inconsequential, but this is not the case, and if you tried to insist that it is, then you simply don't even understand the etymological fallacy. The etymological fallacy refers to when a word changes meaning and refers to a different concept than originally intended, though the original concept remains intact. But then the fallacy comes in when people say that you're not allowed to use the word as anything but what the original concept denoted, which is not what I have argued here. For I have said that the terms male and female can refer to plugs or other such things, and that the word generate can refer to electricity. And I add, it can also refer to bringing something about, as when people are said to generate enthusiasm. A given example of a real etymological fallacy is claiming that the word December can only be used for the 10th month of the year, because it used to refer to the 10th month, using the reasoning that the word December originates from the Latin word for tenth, decimus. But that is false and an example of the etymological fallacy, and we know that in modern times it refers to the 12th month. And moreover, there still is a 10th month. We call it October now, which happens to itself originally mean the 8th month from octo, but that is now August. So you see the thing previously referred to still exists, but there is a new name for it. Another example of the etymological fallacy is claiming that the word decimate, again with the root decimus, can only mean its original meaning, which was to reduce by 1/10. But we know that now it simply refers to being destroyed or nearly destroyed. But again, you can see the original thing still exists. If you were to take a bucket filled with 10 gallons of water and pour out 1 gallon, the thing in the original meaning would be done. And you could even say aloud, that's a historical example of a decimation. But that's not the common word for it anymore. Usually people would just say, I poured out 1/10 of the water, or something similar. In like manner, all these real things I'm describing in gender and sex, male and female, still exist, and we even still call them by their proper and historical names. This is not an example of the etymological fallacy. Which brings me to the necessity of this video. I shouldn't even have to make this video, but recently people have tried to take these words and not redefine them, but instead deny that the real and original meanings even exist. They simply assert their made-up meanings as if they were always the meanings. They do this to fit the real world into their worldview, which is out of line not only with etymology and all of human history up until a few years ago, but also with biology and indeed with reason itself, and I'll quickly prove that too. For instance, people say they, quote, feel like the opposite gender. But if you've never been that gender, how could you know what that feels like? You don't. You're just fooled and deluded. It is a physical impossibility to feel this way. Further, they continue down this line of flawed reasoning that one can, quote, feel like they are something that they are not, to invent new, quote, genders that they, quote, feel like, that don't exist and never existed, that have nothing to do with generation. It is like a child who says that he feels like a, quote, superhero. But superheroes don't exist and never existed, so the child obviously would not know what it would feel like to be one. So someone who tries to tell you that there are more than two genders, or that sex is different than gender, or some other such thing, simply does not know what they are talking about. They can do this because, although the facts are there, and any of you can look them up, and any of you can use your own reason to establish these truths independently of them, these people count on you not to do the research, and not to use your mind, and not to prove them wrong. They stand behind their degrees, or their amount of books that they've sold, or whatever other privileged position they hold or claim to hold, and tell you that they're experts to keep you enslaved. Because insanity is not doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. Many people do that. They're called athletes. Insanity is not accepting the world for what it is, how it is, sober and in line with right reason. So don't listen to sophists or emotional appeals. Don't bask in the adulation of fools. There are only two genders.